Hey, guys, it is Danny Cook. I'm going to give it a second for you guys to get on in here. And we're going to dive right into this highly anticipated broadcast. Here's all that I'm going to ask is that when you come in here today, that you be respectful. Don't get it twisted. Don't come for me, and I won't come for you. Hey, Jen, I'm glad to see you. So I have both my guests here. I'm super excited to have this conversation tonight. I'm pulling up this on my phone so I can also see the comments that may be coming on my personal page. And I'll give it a second for y'all to get on in here. I have to tell you, I am so excited to be doing this broadcast that I'm doing it after driving over 8 hours today. Hey, Jessica, good to see you. I'm excited here. I'm excited to have you guys here. It's been interesting. Ever since I did Monday's broadcast and then I scheduled this broadcast, it's been interesting. Some of the comments that have been made about me again and to me again. Hey, Nancy, I'm excited for this one too. I'm glad to see you guys. Here's what I've got to say. I don't care if you all do or don't like the conversation, because sometimes the truth is hard to take. Hey, Brandy, thank you very much. But here's the thing, what I truly believe is that these conversations are necessary, and they're not being brought up to say, oh, look, you're a racist. That's not it. And if you feel some type of way, maybe you're racist. I don't know. But like, I'm not coming at anyone from that perspective. What I'm saying is, hey, Christy, what's up, honey? What's up, Jamie? I'm coming and saying, hey, listen, there's a history here that is relevant, that is important. And I know that history didn't just end there, because I know the things that I experienced growing up in the region and going to school there. There were several of you that were like, well, it ain't like that around here no more. So let me just tell you, I did some digging. Somebody sent me a message, Misty, I believe, sent me a message about the story that I talked about from 1918 the other day. And after she did that, I reached out. I went to, there's a Facebook page called the Erwin Horror Story. And then that's when I ran across Dustin Street, which I remembered the name, but wasn't sure that Dustin was the same Dustin. Hey, what's up, Maxine? How are you, boo? Hey, Kathy. She says it's going to be a good one tonight. And yep, we're going to see some idiots. I hope not. What's up, Thea? How are you? I really, truly hope not. Hey, Summer, you now live in California. Vast difference from growing up in Erwin, right? So we're going to talk about these things. And I got to talking to him. Hey, Teresa. And I said, hey, are you the same Dustin that did, the Erwin Horror Stories? And because the 4th episode was supposed to be the story that we talked about. And he was like, I am. And he was born and raised in Erwin. And I thought, this is great. I can have a white dude from Erwin on the broadcast with me to talk about these things. So people can stop, I don't know, dogging me out. And then I have to give kudos to Jen, because I got a message from her, and I'm going to introduce you to both of them in just a second. And you went to high school with Dustin's cousin. And thanks, Maxine. I appreciate that, boo. I was in Charlotte earlier today, but we'll chat. And so I got this message from Jen. And one of the things that everybody has been saying to me, not everybody, but, some of y'all that are all in your feelings about this conversation, is saying to me, well, it ain't like that no more. And you stop picking them scabs. It ain't like that around here no more. And then I hear from Jen, and Jen says, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're talking about these things. She's Puerto Rican, moved to the region 3 years ago, and has some very relevant, right now, modern day stories about the things that are still in the region. And so for those of you all who keep saying, it's not like that anymore. No, you're not burning bodies out in front of the damn town and running people out. But make no mistake, the underlying current of racism and sometimes racial ignorance is very much still there. And I'm going to talk to you about this paper. Carrie Russell, if you happen to get wind of this, you did a dissertation for Vanderbilt University and you were doing some research in 2008. I want you on a broadcast with me. So if anybody knows Carrie Wilson, who went to Vanderbilt and did a dissertation, I'm gonna share with you some of her document. But I want her on here as well. So anyway, Yeah, it has. And so we're gonna dive all the way in. You know what I mean? Now here, let me just say this. I will not, don't come for me, folks. Not tonight. I'm tired enough to let you find me. Hey, Addie, how are you? And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Dustin Street, and I'm going to talk to him for a second, and then I'm going to bring up Jen. Okay. What's up, Rockin' Nana? Good to see you from. You're probably watching on YouTube, so good to see you as well. So, all right, folks. So here we go. Dustin. Hey. How are
Hi,
you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So first, I want to say thank you for joining me and doing the broadcast.
Absolutely.
Do me a favor. Tell the people just a little bit about you, kind of what you're up to, what you do on the regular, and why this subject matter was of interest to you.
Sure. So, I guess my day job, you could say, I work as an educator with the school system in Unicoi County. I'm instructional technology coordinator for Unicoi County High School. So I help teachers with professional development and incorporating technology into their classroom. And then I also work with broadcasting students. To learn how to produce their own TV shows and direct and be anchors for the news and stuff like that. And then on the side, I've sort of always had these artistic hobbies that I've dabbled in. From 2012 to about 2016, I was working in filmmaking. I had a really successful web show called The Stranger. And then the more I started dabbling, into more intense topics, I guess you could say, I love the show American Horror Story. It's one of my favorite shows, and I thought I'm going to bring that level of entertainment and drama to a more local scene. And so Erwin Horror Story was born out of that. And then as soon as I started like researching things that I wanted to include on the show, it really became more apparent to me than ever that our area has a darker history than people are willing and ready to admit. So right out the gate, our very first short film was The Visitor. And that plot included a white landowner who had a black wife, and those things actually were happening in the 1800s.
Yep.
Those things it's always been here, but people are just pretending like, oh, this is the way it used to be. But that story intrigued me so much and captivated me, and people responded to it so well. I started digging, and I had always heard the story of Tom Devert growing up, but it was very hush. Like, people love to talk about the elephant. Like, it's that's their favorite thing to talk about around here, and we're all about it. And we'll have elephant revival festivals, and we'll make reparations to the elephants. But nobody wants to talk about Tom Devert and the evil that happened on that day. And so that just became very intriguing to me. Unfortunately, we had to cancel the project because we ran out of funding and time and resources, and things got busy. But there was a film slated to be shot. There's a script written and everything about it. And I just really, like, I knew I could get in some trouble for something like that. But it was a story I wanted to tell, and it's still a story I want to tell. So now I'm working in publishing. I own my own publishing company, Big Small Town Books, and then a young adult imprint called Wise Valley Press. And I'm still on this mission to uncover the stories of marginalized folks, especially BIPOC creators and authors. And so I'm really trying to push to incorporate and find those stories because they're out there. So that's a huge
Let me
part of my
interject.
mission.
He said BIPOC, and for those of you all who don't know what he's talking about, it's Black, Indigenous, People of Color. So he's using an acronym. I'm going to put it in the comments, but it's BIPOC. So that's Black.
Sorry, I should have specified that.
No, that's okay. I mean, I knew what you meant, but I know that there are going to be some people that are like,
what does that mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I lost my lights there for a second. I apologize. Okay. It's the Erwin Horror Story.
Yeah.
They're coming. They can hear me talking about it, and they're coming for me.
The ghosts are mad at you. They're like, "Look here, don't go digging up no stuff, Dustin."
All the white people are like, "You're supposed to be on our side. We're gonna cut your power."
Yeah, and I will say this: like, as soon as you said you're an educator, I kind of held my breath because we see what just happened with Coach Hahn over in Sullivan County Schools for introducing, the article by Ta-Nehisi Coates and having Kyla Janae's poem, "White Privilege," and we see how quickly they shut him down and are intent on running him out of the school system.
That story has disturbed me to no end because I have colleagues that are working with the same kinds of materials in their classes, and it just makes me wonder, like, how long is it before somebody latches onto it and causes trouble here? And it's just that those are very disturbing stories.
Yeah, and it's disturbing to me because for all this talk about it's almost like this pick and choose. So like we want to forget about the past and remember our heritage, but not own what both of those two things mean at the same time, right?
Right.
So if you're going to own your heritage, I need you to own all of it, like
Right.
all of it. Don't pick and choose the shining glory stories. But Kathy Christian said, I thought the same thing, right? Yeah. And so it's that concern that I have about what happens to the ability for educators and for journalists even to tell the truth about history and understand that. So when you tell the truth about something, the idea isn't you want to shame people, right? We understand that that some things aren't going to be pleasant, right? But no one's asking you to feel guilty about what someone else did. What we're asking you to do is to understand the privilege that it gives you, the position that it puts you in. The fact that you could even choose to ignore it is your
privilege. Absolutely.
Right. And so what we're asking you to do is say, hey, this happened. These are the systems that are in place that benefit me. And then you have to be willing to want equity enough to give up your advantage. And I just don't know that.
Yeah, there in the last few years, especially, there has been this war on truth, and it's like when I grew up, like growing up, I was raised that the truth is the most important thing we have. It is the thing that will set us free. It is, my mom always told me, don't lie to me. If you do something bad, you tell me the truth, and we'll work it out. But if you lie to me, it's going to make things worse. And I feel like our society is in a place where we'd rather lie about something unpleasant or ignore something unpleasant than just face it and sit with it for a minute and think about it and figure out how we move forward from it.
Right. Absolutely. And so having said that, before we dive into the story around 1918 and Tom Devert and some of the reasons why I am like, okay, so Richard Rourke, who is a local journalist in Erwin, has reached out and messaged me privately and has told me how much, and this is what really irritates me, is he's busy telling me how much I need to reach out to Rise Erwin because they really are trying to change things, and how much I need to talk to. I don't need to do shit. So here's the way that I feel. If Rise Erwin, and this is what I said to him, if Rise Erwin wants to communicate to the minority population that there is an effort, a real movement in Erwin and in the Tri-Cities to change things, then you reach out to me. Yeah. You reach out to me, and I'll make the platform available to you. I will bring you on. Just don't expect for me to not ask you difficult questions.
And let me add just a little bit of context to that. There are some great folks in Rise Erwin, and some of them I know, but I'm going to go back to the elephant. The elephant sanctuary in Hohenwald, Tennessee did not reach out to Rise Erwin and say we need to do something for the elephants because of what happened in Erwin with Mary. So if we're not expecting the elephant people to take the initiative, why are we expecting Black people to make contact and say, hey, can you, maybe help me, do something about this? Like, no, it's not on people of color to initiate these movements. It's on us as white people.
And that was the other thing. He was saying how badly, and these are his words, how badly Erwin needs minority-owned businesses and how much he needs. And this is my response. If you would like Black, Indigenous people of color to rebuild your economy again, then I'm going to need you to incentivize us because we don't owe you anything. Like we built it for you once. We don't have to build this. We don't have to build the economic structure for towns and countries anymore, especially when you ran us out. So one of the reasons I want to bring Jen on is because she sent me this message, and oftentimes people will do this, and I'll say, can I share your stuff anonymously? And they'll let me share it anonymously, right? And then I'll say, I know this is a big ask, but would you be willing to come on the broadcast? And usually they're like, because they don't want to be outed, And so I asked her the same thing. I was like, I know it's a big ask, and when she said, oh my God, I'm shy, but okay, I was like, oh yeah, it's on. And the reason why I got excited about this is because I know what still exists in the region, but the other day, there were people on this broadcast and people on my page that absolutely called me everything but a child of God, and accused me of digging at things from the past, and it was 100 years ago, and it's not what's happening today, and it's not da 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 da. And I think that people really need to understand how much racial ignorance still exist in the community and how it shows up and how it is traumatizing and how it is real. Like at 48 years old, I still will not stop and use a public restroom in Erwin. Like I won't, just because, and I wanted to. Like I literally was like, come on, girl, you could do it.
Yeah.
And I got to the exit and was like, hell no, and just kept on rolling, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to bring Jen on, and I'm going to add her to the stream. So it's all three of us. Hey, Jen.
Hi.
Thank you for joining. I'm super excited. So I normally wouldn't ask this question, but because this broadcast is around race and ethnicity and culture, can you share with people your race and your ethnic background, your cultural makeup?
Okay, so I am Puerto Rican. I am a U.S. citizen. Just so let's get that out there. I am not an immigrant, and there was nothing wrong if I was. But just so we get, the first piece of history out there, I am a U.S. citizen, and not everybody knows that. Like you said, there's a lot of ignorance about that. I still get asked, "Do you need a visa to come to the U.S.? Do you need a green card?" And
for those of you guys who don't get it, Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, right?
Yes.
Puerto Rico. Now, I will say this. Here's what I don't like. I do not like the fact that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory and you vote, but you have no electoral votes. So, like, your vote really doesn't mean jack in terms of like the election. So, to me, that's a problem for me. That is taxation without representation. That is a whole lot of things. Same thing with Washington, D.C., right? So these are things that maybe some of you all watching do not realize, that Puerto Rico is in fact a U.S. territory. They do vote, but their popular vote is all they have. They have zero electoral votes. Mm-hmm. So when they vote, it doesn't matter. So no, she does not need a visa to come here. She does not need a green card to be here. None of those things. And the reason why she's clarifying that is because she's going to share with you some things that have happened in this conversation where those things have actually come up for her and her husband. So Jen, tell me when did your husband and then when did you move to the region, and where did you guys move first?
So my husband moved here about 4 years ago, right before Hurricane Maria hit. He got a job over here, so he moved to the area. Obviously, we don't know anything about the area when he took this job. So he ended up in Erwin, and Hurricane Maria hit. And after the hurricane, I decided that it was best for me and my kids to move here with him. Obviously, it was a struggle. We were having a hard time. So I decided to get a transfer and move here. In March, after he had already started working, I decided that I was going to take a trip over here to see the area, the Erwin area.
In March 2018 or 2019?
2018.
Okay.
2018.
Okay.
So I decided to take a trip because I wanted to see the area, see what the Tri-Cities was all about. I wanted to see what Erwin was all about because I was actually looking at houses to buy in the area and everything. And my husband, I remember, tells me, just so you know, don't get scared. It's a little different here. And it's not like we haven't traveled before. I even lived in Texas for a little while when I was younger. So I have experienced different cultures. I've lived in different places. And he made sure that he let it be known that it was just a little different. He didn't want to say, oh, there's racism going on here, because he didn't want me to come here with my mindset on something. He wanted to see it and see what was going on for myself. And I remember that the very next day after I had arrived, I went into a diner, and it was so funny because I walked in and everybody, like in the movies, everybody turned around and looked at us like, who are these people? Like we were weird or something like that.
Yeah, so
I thought it was really funny, but at the same time, after a little while, it was a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, so this is what I used to say when I would come home and I would visit and things. I would say, are y'all staring at me because of the melanin in my skin, or because I'm cute? I really want to know, And then after doing the protest, it became really impossible. Like it was always uncomfortable, but then after doing the protest, it just became, there was nowhere I could go without the whispers and the talk and the whatever. So I totally get it. So 2018, you come, you go to a diner, you guys are being stared at. What are some of the things that people in the region, in Erwin and in Hawkins County, have said to you? Because you now live in Hawkins County.
Right. So after that, I went back to Puerto Rico, and then I was able to, finally move here with the kids, and we actually moved to the Hawkins County area. And since I have been here, I have experienced things like I've been to stores, and I'll have somebody like staring at me, and they'll be like, "What is your ethnicity?" And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, how do you just walk up to a person and ask that? That is so disrespectful. And I'm like, "Why do you ask?" "Oh, because you don't look Mexican." And then I'm thinking, okay, is Mexico the only place where people look like me? Or where I'm supposed to look like I'm from?
Only Latin and Hispanic country they know. It's you. If you are Latin, Hispanic, it's Mexico. Like, that's all they know. Yeah, absolutely.
So things like that. I have been in stores where I'll be like, "Oops, I'm sorry." I'll bump into somebody, and and I quote, they've called me, "Yeah, you better be sorry, spick." And I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I was obviously completely caught off guard. I just kind of stood there, and we went into a back and forth, and then I walked away because I was by myself. This person was with other people. Nobody said anything. They just went at it. But nobody came out in my defense either. So, and there was other people there.
And that's my thing. So if you are watching this and you go, "Oh, that's so horrible," they shouldn't say that to her, but yet you would be the person in the store who didn't speak up, and you don't call your friends out on these things. If you don't correct them, you are part of the problem. And in my opinion, that white silence is even more of a problem than the overt racism, because it co-signs it, right?
Yep.
But white silence is a larger minority than the overt racism, and people don't seem to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell me, this is the one that really got me, the story about your husband.
So along with that, we had a situation where he went into a place to eat, and he wanted to get something to drink, and you get carded. So he gave the person, the waitress, the ID, and it was the ID that he had from Puerto Rico. And she looked at it, gave it back to him, and said, "Oh, no, I'm sorry. If you're an immigrant, you need your green card. Otherwise, you cannot get a beer here."
Bonkers. I mean, absolutely bonkers.
Right. It's the most like, and
ignorance.
And then people wonder why. They wonder why people look at this region the way they do, right? They wonder why people are like, they think that they're backwoods, redneck, whatever. And it's because of things like this. Like, how do you not know that Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory? How do you not know exactly what an immigrant is or isn't? How do you not know in 2021, right?
That's the thing. I because it's not just these things that have happened. I've had my son at school. I've had kids his age in middle school say, "Oh, because you're Puerto Rican, it's okay for you to call so-and-so a nigger because you're Puerto Rican." And he's came home because, see, race is not a thing that we would talk about here in my house, because to us it's nothing. We don't see race. We don't see colors. To us, everybody's the same. So ever since we moved here, it's when we've had to explain to them, like, okay, so this is what race is.
Yeah.
And no, you cannot call somebody a nigger because you are Puerto Rican, and that gives you a go card, and you can pass and do that. No. So we've had these conversations, and I've had people where I worked, grown up folks, ask me, Did you speak English before or did you learn it here? Because you don't have an accent. And I'm like, is that supposed to be a compliment? Or, I mean, are you
I'm
just
very well spoken.
automatically
Yeah, you're
like
very well
expecting
spoken.
that because, Spanish is my first language, that I need to have an accent because
Yes.
that is what is expected of me.
Yes. Yeah. Like I got so much during the protest when I was doing my lives, or I would go before the board of mayor and aldermen and all of those things. And it was, oh, you're so well spoken, as if I'm not supposed to be. I don't understand. I
Like
don't
by
understand what
default, you shouldn't be because of how you look. You're just an
exactly.
exceptional case. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It's like, oh, so I saw a video the other day. The TV show where they swap wives, right? Where the
Yeah.
wives swap houses. And there's a white woman that goes into this black house, and she's looking at like the artwork, and this she was like, well, they seem to be a black family, but they're so clean. Like that's literally what was said on the episode, and I was like, what does that mean? Like they seem to be black people, but they're so clean, as if they're not supposed to be clean. It really gets me. So Summer Porter says, because Summer Porter's from the region, she says in 1995, Unicoi County High School did not even celebrate MLK Day, and I was told by a teacher, quote unquote, because there are no black people in town. Well, hell no, you ran them all out. You ran them all out. Like that's why there are no black people there. Which brings us right around to the story. Stick with me, Jen, unless you got somewhere you want to go.
Yeah.
But so here's what happened, and Dustin is going to kind of fill in. So y'all heard me talk about on Monday night the story about Tom Devert, who is a black man who lived in Erwin, had lived there for years. And the story, now here's what's interesting, is depending upon whose version of the story you're listening to as to what really happened. And I will tell you, I call BS on the story that was published in the papers.
Yep.
And the stories that people said, because the story that they told was that Tom Devert was walking and grabbed this girl, Georgia. She's walking with her little brother, and he tries to take her by the arm. He grabs her and goes to drag her across the river and almost drowns her. And then that's when he's shot and murdered by 4 white guys. And then they burn his body, and they round up all the black people in the town to make them watch them burn his body. And then they say to them, if you're here by tomorrow, this time, we're going to do the same thing to you. Right now, I read a different story, and Dustin, I do want you to weigh in on this
Sure.
because you've done more research than I have on this. But the other story that I heard was that Tom Devert, he worked at the railroad, which is where a lot of them
As a
work.
bricklayer. Yep.
My understanding is that he was an upstanding citizen prior to this day, and he was married, and that he had actually had a poker game with some white guys, had won, had bought some land with the money. And whatever, a few days before, all of a sudden he's being accused of grabbing a white girl, which let me just tell y'all, that's a common thing, right? Y'all always want to accuse black men of trying to grab your white women as an excuse to murder them, right?
Yeah.
We've seen that historically. We've seen white women now who cause the murder of people, right?
Yep.
Emmett Till and so forth and so on, who've confessed later, no, this is not really what happened, right? Y'all don't even want me to go into the elevation of white women as the prize to be won for black men. And if they looked upon them with their dirty eyes or whatever, that this was the thing. So I happen to believe the poker story. I happen to believe that more so than anything, he got the best of 4 white guys at a poker table. And they didn't quite like, they don't like it when niggers get out their place. That's kind of my take. Dustin, what's your take on that?
So I'll kind of like go like with the order that I've pieced together, because there's some context I think that will be really helpful in sort of analyzing what happened. And there's other events that were happening within the same time period in other parts of the country that I think will be really relevant. But basically, post-Civil War, during Reconstruction, East Tennessee was actually a very lucrative place for freed Black people to locate. There was a lot of work here because it was a railroad town. The Industrial Revolution was really like full speed ahead. So Tom Devert and his wife Sally, who was pregnant with his child at the time, moved here, bought property on Tony Avenue, which is actually where my best friend Drew lives. He lives on the same street where they own property. So we think we've kind of narrowed it down to where the house was, but there's like no deed record that I know of. I've never been able to find one. But basically, this was a normal suburban family. They had everything that most of the other people that were living in this area had at the time. He was an upstanding citizen, and he got a great job at the railroad as a bricklayer, and he was doing his part and doing everything right. But like you said, when Black people are successful, we tend to have a problem with that. And just a few years later in Tulsa, when Black people there would become so successful that they were actually siphoning money from white people, we decided to bomb the city, basically, and destroy town. Black Wall Street. Yeah. So that's just sort of, that gives some context. So
that's not the only town. Let's just be clear.
Absolutely.
Wilmington, North Carolina happened before the Tulsa Massacre happened.
Right.
So historically speaking, in this country,
right,
when freed Blacks were successful, when they were getting money, when they were buying homes, when they did have land, there was an intentional effort by white people and by the government to get rid of those towns, to get rid of those individuals, to terminate and exterminate those communities that were thriving and successful.
Right.
So go ahead, Dustin.
So the story that we were actually going to tell in the fourth Erwin horror story film, which I'll be honest, I hope we still get to produce it someday, because I'm very close to the story, and it's so important that we start confronting things like this. But the story that we were going to tell took place before what happened, and we were going to show the context of the family and moving and being happy and supporting each other and having a great life. Tom Devert actually had friends at the railroad that were very close to him, so we had written in those characters, those white character friends. But basically what happened was, the guys would all, after work, they would go and play poker and drink. That was just what they did. And there was a spot where Chestoa Pike is now, and they would go out there on the rocks and set up their poker games and play. And one day Tom bested him because he was a very good poker player. He was very good at it, and he knew all the tricks. He knew all of the sleights of hand and the poker faces. So when he won, obviously the rest of those guys were not too happy about it and started chasing him. And that is actually when he ran upon the Georgia Lee Collins. And it's one of those things where we think about it. If you're being chased by a mob, suddenly you come upon somebody, you're probably just wanting some help or, whatever. And, a lot of the articles said, she was his human shield and all of this stuff. And but that's basically, where things went according to the story, that we know. Obviously there are so many different versions of this story, and even the newspapers around here. I have microfilm copies. Like the Erwin newspapers reported it this way. The Johnson City newspapers reported it this way. Kingsport even got a hold of it, and the Bristol Herald Courier. They all had different, slightly different versions of the event. But essentially they shot him in the head and then tied him to the back of a train caboose and dragged him into town, which was about 2 miles away, into the main station, which 2 years prior had seen the hanging of Mary, the elephant. So it's the same area. And basically the boss of the railroad at the time, L.H. Fettiplace, when he caught wind of what was going on, he was not from around here. So he was a northern, Yankee. He was trying to stop this. He was saying, don't do this. The crowd was threatening to go into the Black quarters, which were in the south end of town, and burn it down, because that's just how angry they were. He was trying to calm that storm, and it didn't work because you got that mob mentality. It was just a very tragic story. And I don't feel like people really truly understand the full context of the story. They have the 4 or 5 little nuggets. And basically, and I think you showed a picture of a bench earlier that is actually. I'm
going to show it in just a second.
Yeah. So we're characterizing Tom as this evil man.
Before we get there, I want to talk about that in a second. But so this is his certificate of death. Yeah. This is Tom Devert's certificate of death. And the things that I found to be interesting, right, is you get the unknowns and all of that, right? But when you get over here, the cause of death was as follows. And it says killed by, and they started to write the word mob.
Yep.
And then they scratched it out and then said unknown persons. Yep. No, you know exactly
who it was.
What happened, right? But you scratched out the word mob and you put unknown persons in an attempt to rape or rape on Georgia Lee Collins, right? So now the story has changed from, oh, he grabbed her and tried to drag her through a river, to now he's trying to
rape her. Yeah.
Yes, which is classic. I mean, this is classic American history, right?
Yep.
This is if you want to beat, murder, lynch a black man back in these days,
yep.
just say he was trying to grab, look at, rape a white woman, and it's totally acceptable. And they will not only come and lynch him and burn him, and they will bring their children to watch. You know, that's the thing that people don't remember, is that these just weren't, it wasn't just like these were just the white males. No, like the wives came, like they acted like this was a damn dinner show sometimes.
It was a spectacle. Yeah. Which was
it was
disgusting.
Right. And it just, it says to me this level of cognitive dissonance that has to be present for this region to claim to be God's country, for this to be the region that's all about Jesus and Christ. And yet we will bring our wives and our children to come out and watch the burning of a human body that's been drugged 2 miles across town and shot in the head. Yeah. So this is what's interesting now. So the other thing is, somebody said to me, oh, well, this is just old news and Erwin wants to make amends for this. Well, so let me just show you what still exists today in the Erwin Cemetery. So this is a bench that is in the Erwin Cemetery. It actually backs up to the plant that's there. And it says, forever remembered in Erwin, Tennessee, Georgia Lee Collins, May 8th, 1903 to May 19th, 1918. She drowned in the Nolichucky River at the hands of an evil man. Listen, for me, this might as well be a damn Confederate statue, because you don't want to make amends. You don't want to own your own ish. You don't want to do the right thing by what you all did in the town, because this is what you still have up currently in your cemetery. Yeah. Like that's my take on it. So I want to back up for just a second. And so you all heard me say at the beginning of the broadcast, I was talking about Carrie Russell, and she did her dissertation for Vanderbilt University, and I couldn't get it all to print, but so I'm going to give you guys the link. I know many of you will not read that sucker's 200 some odd pages long, so you won't read it all, but I just want to share a few snippets from what she talks about, because she actually, she talks about, hold on, let me make sure which page I'm at. Okay, here we go. So she talks about this movie that she saw called Banished. And it was talking about all of these towns between the 1960s to the 1920s across the United States where they violently expelled African-American residents. And so she'd seen this, and that was when she learned about Erwin's history and so forth. And she knew that there weren't a lot of Black people in Erwin, but didn't really know why. And so she goes on to talk about this. And on the film's website, there's a map of the communities in the United States that banished their Black citizens. And the map's caption states that between 1890 and 1930, more than 4,000 Black residents were banished from communities in 8 states along the Mason-Dixon line. So just so you all know, the 12 states that were the most active in lynching in the United States of America were Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and Virginia. So Tennessee makes it into both one of the most 12 active states for lynching in the United States, and it makes it into one of the 8 states along the Mason-Dixon line that banished a total of 4,000 Black residents in these 8 different states. So they talk about Polk County, right, where the banishment occurred in 1894, and then Erwin, where it took place in May of 1918, which is what we're talking about with Tom Devert. But so get this, there was a journalist that wrote a series of newspaper articles about these banishments in 2006. His name is Elliot Jaspin. So Carrie wrote Mr. Jaspin, and she asked if he could tell her more about what he discovered in Erwin and so forth and so on, right? So get this. He said that when he was doing his field research in Erwin, he was told of an old timer, a local white, quote unquote, community historian that might be willing to talk to him about the incident. He made arrangements to meet the man at his home. When Jaspin arrived, the man met him on the front porch and asked him point blank, "Are you a Jew?" When Jaspin asked him what difference would that make, The old timer replied, quote, "I won't be talking to a Jew," and shut the door in his face. So we can add anti-Semitic
Anti-Semitism,
rhetoric.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like right in the mix. Like, I mean, at least you're not discriminatory in your hatred, right?
Yeah.
Y'all will apply it just about anywhere. And so I'm going to put the link up for you guys. But so she goes on to say, after this happened in 2008, Carrie went on her own investigation. And I'm going to share with you just a little bit about that. And then the three of us are going to discuss this piece. So let me read this part to you. So she decides that she's going to embark on this her own investigation in June of 2008 in the library at ETSU. And so she digs in and she gets some of the newspaper articles and all of that, and then she makes her way down to Erwin. Okay, and she goes on and she tells the story, right, about what the paper said and who all was involved. But the first stop that she made at Erwin was at the Unicoi County Cultural Heritage Museum. The museum is housed in a 2-story Victorian home in a park-like setting on the banks of the Doe River, and also serves as the headquarters of the Erwin Historical Society. That morning, I was greeted by a white-haired woman, I would guess in her 80s. She introduced herself as Martha. Now, get this. She says, before she let me enter, she asked me why I have come to the Heritage Museum. And so she goes to talk about the things that she sees in the background. She sees, the Civil War soldier hanging above some inlaid fireplaces. And she explains Carrie explains, I'm from Johnson City. I was raised in Johnson City. I'm visiting from Nashville, and I'm interested in learning more about Erwin's history. So the first thing that Martha asks her is, what were her family surnames and what side of the war her family fought for? That's the first thing she asks her. What's your family's names, right? And what side of the war did you fight for?
I'm surprised she didn't add in there, where do you go to church?
Right. That would be the third thing.
Yeah.
And so she told her grandparents' names, and then she truthfully relayed that all of her great-great-grandfathers had fought for the Confederacy. She nodded and invited her inside. I don't know what would have happened if she'd said that, they joined the Yankees, but whatever. She told her that she was the president of the Erwin Historical Society, and she would give me a tour of the home. So get this. She's going on down through here, and I want to get to this part down here that really got me. Hold on. She's talking about all the stuff in this stuff, and I don't really care about that. I want to get to this part. All right, here we go. So, holy geez, it's so crazy. Now remember, this is in 2008, guys. So 12 out of a total county population of 70,740 people were Black people. I told y'all, Black people in Erwin make up 0.7% of Erwin and 0.5%, 0.5%. Yeah. So 0.5% in Unicoi County. And that's according to the 2000 census, right? But she goes on to say, so get this. She starts to ask about Tom Devert. She starts to talk about, Carrie wants to know. She says, hey, I want to investigate, what happened about, this thing with Tom Devert. And Martha says to her, that didn't happen. You shouldn't be talking about it. And ends the tour. That didn't happen. You shouldn't be talking about it. And that's it. Interview over. Interview done. There is this well, it did damn happen. It's in the books. And
right. It's in the newspaper. There's a bench.
Yeah. Why should we not be talking about it? Why should we not be asking what are the lingering effects from what happened? And I want to ask you, Dustin, because you're born and raised there, as a white man, born and raised in Erwin, have you witnessed, and what do you believe to be the current state of racism, both overt and covert, in Erwin and Unicoi County?
Yeah, so I guess I'll pull this out. This is kind of like a personal story, and I guess not a lot of people know this. I actually have Japanese heritage. My grandmother immigrated here from Hokkaido.
That's the second time I'm going to hold my breath for you.
Yeah, so growing up, I had a family member, now ex-family member, I will say happily, who tried to keep me from my dad because he didn't like that I was going up there and being influenced by what he called, the Japs, and he called my dad's house Japville. And it was just my entire childhood growing up. And then I lost my dad at 16. So I had all these years that I didn't get to spend, there were certain weekends and things like that, but it was constant. So that was sort of my first personal exposure to racism. And I didn't even realize how badly it was going to affect me moving forward. And then, of course, we have a lot of Erwin and Unicoi County in general have a large migrant worker population. A lot of Hispanic folks who have immigrated here. We have a lot of Hispanic students in our school. So there's definitely been instances over the years of racism against, those folks, and just awful things that have been said about them, but they're doing the work here, and they're making a life for themselves, and they're doing their best, and their kids they're so brilliant. This is my 7th year working at the high school, and our Hispanic population, they are just salt of the earth. I love them. They are so brilliant. They've won homecoming pageants. They've, been top of their class. They've gone on to get full ride scholarships at private schools. They're just very great students and kids, and they don't deserve the racism. And one particular instance, I won't say where or who or the specifics, but there was an instance when a certain former president had just gotten elected, where a group of white people approached a group of Hispanic students and started yelling and chanting, build the wall, and I was out there and caught wind of that, and I shut it down immediately, because I just that's not going to fly with me. But just to know the like, I don't know, the audacity, I don't know, it just shocked me that they would do that.
Do you think because people will tell you no, do you think that the former president emboldened more racism to be overtly displayed than?
Oh, absolutely. It's because it was normalized.
Like, yes.
it was normalized in a way that I'm sure, all the presidents have had their flaws, but just under Trump, it was normalized in a way that I had never seen in my lifetime. And even, family members that are older than me that I've talked to, things that we saw with Trump just had never been so normalized. And yes, those people were emboldened to walk up to people that didn't look like them and jeer at them and make these taunts and chants. And it's just, they're flying his flags. They're, cheering his name. They've got his stickers on their stuff. Like it was a whole brand that Trump built that people bought into.
But the brand to me is white supremacy and racism and elitism. Like, it's nationalism. It is white nationalism,
right,
at its finest. And people can say whatever you want, but so, like, there's a difference between being a patriot and being a nationalist, right? So one is when you're a patriot, and I definitely consider myself to be, having served in the military, having my family has all served, my parents served, my brother served, all of that. I would say a true patriot is someone who loves their country so much, and loves the potential of their country, maybe I should say, that they will hold their country accountable, because it can be and do better, right? So I think when you endorse whatever your country does, or when you endorse whatever your town does, or when you endorse whatever your neighbor does, simply because your neighbor looks like you, or just because it's America, right? That is not loving your country, right? When you love your children, you don't condone everything they do, right? You hold your children accountable to growth and to doing the right thing, and to having compassion and empathy, and being concerned about your neighbors. And it just seems like all of that has been lost, especially over the last 4 or 5 years or so. And so that's of a big concern to me.
Let me add on really quick, just before you move on. Just talking about the military, I have family members that served, and something that really has bothered me probably since George Bush's presidency, when we started this conflict in Afghanistan, I hate that conservatives appropriated and commandeered our military and made it their thing. And I'm just like, wait a second. There are Black people that serve in the military. There are gay people. There are trans people. There are all kinds of different races and religions and ethnicities. So how are we going to appropriate the military for one race and with the purpose of spreading white supremacy, colonizing? It got very messy and dirty for me, and the military became a very hard subject to talk about, because if you didn't bow down to everything that a conservative viewpoint wanted you to believe, then you were anti-military.
Yes. Oh, and not just anti-military, like that means you're anti-Christian too. Like you're anti-Jesus, right? Because somehow or another, conservatives have adopted Jesus as their thing, as if like only Republicans can be Christian.
Only white straight Republicans are the only people that can.
Right. Yeah. White hetero, like they're the epitome. And so it bothers me that we have politicized things that are not political at all. And you saw me get really upset when they made the dignified transfer of our 13 soldiers coming back from Afghanistan, when they made it about a fucking watch. I was because that's a distraction, people. That is the distraction. And do you know how hard you have to be looking to try to figure out if somebody's looking at their watch, or whether they're looking at the rosary beads from their dead son who was also a soldier? Like, you don't know what that person is doing. And like, just to make that the focal point, I was stupid angry. To the same thing over Pelosi and the names being read into the congressional record when she wasn't even in the room. Right. It makes me very angry because let me just say this. It is not rich white people who serve in the military. Let's be very clear about that. It is undeniably the people that are, middle to lower class, most often lower class. It is most often minorities and people and white people who come from rural communities where they don't have a lot of other options, right? I mean, I know growing up in Bristol, you either worked for what was Beecham and became King Pharmaceuticals and is now whatever it is, right? The hospital, the racetrack, Bristol compressors, Speed Clip, the factories in town. Like those were the jobs that you had, or you joined the military, because most people, college was not an option. And so I think what really makes me angry is the people that are being used and politicized are the people that sacrifice, and they're the people that get the least from this country. And it does make me very, very angry, having served. And so like I've shared this. So when I launched my podcast in 2018, it was in the height of the Colin Kaepernick stuff. And folks back home, y'all managed to piss me off even then. And that was when I did that was when I did my first, and it wasn't like a broadcast like this. I just had finished working out and was pissed. And so I hopped on a live, like still in my workout clothes and whatever. And because it was right after the Nike commercial had come out and featuring Colin Kaepernick, and people were putting up Pat Tillman's picture, like, this is what a real veteran looks like, and it really angered me, first of all, because his wife said, don't use my husband this way. Like Pat Tillman's wife said, do not use my husband for your racial stuff. But it was people back home that I had gone to high school with that were posting these things. And so I did you can find it on YouTube or whatever, but I did a live that's called Dear White Associates. And it says, in parentheses, because you are not my friend if this applies to you. So it's not Dear White Friends, but Dear White Associates. So, yeah, because you're not my friend. I don't care if we went to school together. I don't care if you've known me from Holston View to Fairmount to Vance to Tennessee High. I don't care. If this is you, you're not my friend. And this is what people don't seem to understand. You do not have to like or agree with kneeling before the flag. That's fine. Because guess what? I don't like or agree with tiki torches and white sheets and shit. Like, absolutely. So you can find it offensive that someone might use their First Amendment right to kneel before the flag. I find it offensive that you ride through like Russell and Scott counties and you throw out Ziploc bags full of KKK flyers and corn, right? Like, I find that offensive. I find white lives matter. I find that offensive. So, but guess what? It is still your right to, like, you do have a right to be racist. However, your right to be racist ends where my rights begin. So you can march on that street with your permit, and that's cool up until the time that you put a cross in my yard, up until the time that you call me a name, up until the time that you infringe upon my rights. And and we do have full rights. Like, I don't know, like, I don't tell me to go back because nobody told you to bring us here, right? If you want to go back, go take your ass back to Europe, because that's where y'all came from. This is not
Exactly.
your country. Yeah, this is white America. This is not your country. This is not your land. This is the land of Native Americans and indigenous people, who, by the way, I have so much respect for. If you've never, like, I went to Standing Rock and it was life changing for me. I will never be the same. I get emotional when I talk about it, because of what they asked us to learn while we were there. They ask us to learn 4 principles. They ask us to, first and foremost, when we deal with them, to be indigenous centered. In other words, I need to be mindful of what it must be like to be indigenous in this country. Yep. What must it be like to be a Native American and have Columbus Day or Thanksgiving? Like that was like a friendly dinner or some shit. It was not. It was genocide, right? When Europeans got here, there were 60 million Native Americans. And then there were 5 million. They eradicated 55 million between murder and disease. And that is the largest, that is a horrific number. Like we think about like the Holocaust at 6 million. Think about 55 million.
Yep.
And then everywhere you ride around town, like, it disgusts me that DB is still the Indians. And 2 students tried to change that. I had them on the broadcast, right? I had them on the broadcast and they talked about it. And y'all called me names then too. And I still don't care, because not everything belongs to you. Not everything belongs to you. You do not get to claim the word Indian or Native American. It is not yours. It does not belong to you. And you need to listen to people of color, Black, indigenous people of color. When we say to you, what you're doing is racist, what you're saying is racist, you should never ask Jen. I've been asked too. So what are you made of? What are you mixed with? I'm not what do you mean? I'm not, what am I mixed with? Like, nobody, this is not some chemical recipe. Nobody picked 2 dogs and blended them to make me. But I've been called mixed breed. I've been called half breed. I've been called wannabe nigger. And this was just in the last year while I was home living in Tennessee.
My favorite is when you tell them, oh, I'm from, Johnson City. And they say, but where are you really from? Where's your family from? And they keep digging in with it.
Going back to what you just said and what we talked about before, for example, when I said, sometimes I get asked, did you speak English before? Or did you learn to speak English when you moved here because you don't have an accent? I had somebody, a white person, ask me that. And this person, I feel comfortable talking to. And I said, let me ask you something. Listen to yourself. Ask me the question once again and listen to yourself as you're asking me. Do you see anything wrong with it? And he was like, no, I don't, because I don't mean any harm or anything by it. And I said, you don't. And if I'm not thinking about it, I might not even think anything of it either. But because it's happened so many times, like the first time it happened, I was like, oh, I don't have an accent, whatever. But as things continued to happen and I started catching on to things, I was like, wait a minute. No, these are microaggressions.
Yes.
People don't understand that, So granted, not everybody's like that. Like you said on your podcast or your show last time, not everybody's like that. I've met some great people since I've moved here, but it's these bad experiences that leave like a bad taste in your mouth. Like I told you before, when I talk to my friends and my family who still live in Puerto Rico, they're like, so how are you liking it there? And, is it great? And I'm like, well, I mean, it's okay. Obviously it's not home, but there are things that have really, like, put a damper on my parade. You might not think that they're big things, but to me they are, because it's these little things that add up, and then all of a sudden I'm like, where am I living? Where did I move to? Why do these people still think this way?
Right. And at some point in time, you cannot use, so I used to give everybody in this region grace. And here's what I would say. I would say, well, listen, when you live and you grow up in an area and you don't move outside the area, right? You don't get exposed to a lot. And every county there is 91 to 98% white, right? Then you don't know a lot. But here's the truth. You can be as exposed as you want to be. Like, that's the truth. You can be as exposed as you want to be. If you truly desire to learn, there's so many resources out there where you can know if you want to know. And the truth is, though, if you know, then you have to be accountable for that knowing. And
especially now with technology.
That's the point, right?
This isn't the 1900s, the 1800s, right, where you didn't have, if you didn't travel out of the area that you lived, you didn't know any better. But no, that's not the case now.
And like it's work. People have to do the work. I mean, if you don't do the work, you're never going to get better. But people don't want to do the work,
right? Because I mean, why would you do that? It's much easier for me to not do the work and then blame everybody else for stirring things up, because then I don't have to be accountable for not doing the work, right? I don't have to be accountable for knowing. And I think that that's where it boils down to. And I think one of the things that I say, and I will be really transparent in this moment and say, sometimes it's hard, because I do want to have these conversations. And sometimes I have them from this really great grace-giving space, and I am tolerant and I am patient and I'm whatever. And then there are some times when people come for me and I'm like, well, you can just get it, because like, I don't have anything left, because my bandwidth is, I'm human at the end of the day. And and the truth is, it is not my responsibility to educate you. It is not my responsibility to carry you and to fix you and to whatever. And people will not like to hear this, but that's an issue with white America, is you've always had Black, Indigenous, people of color do the work, whether that's like the heavy lifting literally or figuratively. Then you want to blame people for not having jobs because you want to work.
with marginalized populations in general, those people who are marginalized have to deal with the weight of what's going on in these places and in these spaces that they're in daily, at all times of the day. It's always on their mind. It's always something that they have to deal with. Whereas a non-marginalized person, white, straight, Christian, whatever, all they have to do is go on and call a few people snowflakes on their Facebook feed, and then they go on about their lives and they don't think about it again until they have, until they see something else they want to comment on. So it's just, it's a privilege that's not being recognized.
Yeah. I am biracial 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't get a break, right? It is my experience. And it's so funny. Sometimes, Jen, I said this the other night, let me take my ass to Florida, Texas, or California. And they be like, right? It's like, and firing off the Spanish. And I used to be decently fluent. I want to be fluent again. But I'd be like, no habla español un poquito, like just a little bit. That's it. Like, that's all I got. I can hear it. That's all I got. But because people look at me, and here's what they might not know what I am. They just know I ain't white, right? So they're not sure if I'm Hispanic, if I'm Black, if I'm this, if I'm that, And I always joke. So I can joke because it's me, right? So I used to say, listen, y'all don't believe I'm Black until y'all see my blue magic hair grease and my coconut oil, or you throw my ass in the pool and you give me an hour for my hair to dry, right? Then you'll know. But those are like, and here's the truth. Like, I've gotten it from Black people, right? Being biracial. Being biracial has been no fun, especially as a child. I was the loving generation, right? That's my generation. I'm 48 years old. When I went to school at Holstonview Elementary, all the standardized tests said Black and white. There was an other, right? That was it. There were no breakdowns, no choices, no whatever. And my life has very much been on one side, you are not white enough for white people. And on the other side, you are not black enough for black people. Like there's a black guy right now in the comments that said, you're a red bone. No, sir. You know, I hate that shit. My bones are white, ivory color, like most everybody else's bones are. You know what I mean? But there's always this thing. And because my mother was very much so focused on the way that I speak, before my father passed away after 2 tours in Vietnam, and he developed lung cancer, and he died at the age of 33 at Bristol Regional. And it was Bristol Memorial Hospital back in the day, right? Up on the hill off of State Street. And one of the things that my dad made my mom promise was that she would make sure that we all spoke well, because he knew that if his children carried the dialect and just the Ebonics, you know, that we tend to speak in our neighborhoods, what that would lead to for them. And so my mother was always on us about our enunciation and our pronunciation. And so what that did for me was I always did well in school and so forth and so on. However, by the time I reached about 12 years of age, I really had to learn how to talk around Black people, because I grew up with a white mom, and my dad was deceased. And, you know, so I didn't have that in my home. And so I learned how to code switch and very effectively. But if I wanted to fit in, and even now I have Black friends now that will joke with me sometimes, because when I'm talking, they'll say, oh, well, you know, you say it, but you don't say it quite like us. Right. Yeah. See, you're nodding, Jen, because you get it.
I get it.
And so for me, it's like living in this void of aloneness, where I've always been. And that's why I feel some sort of way. Like I'm a hippie at heart. Thank you, Dustin. I'm a hippie at heart. So if I could like twinkle my nose and have everybody be this like love fest of, you know, of colors and all of that, that's what I would want. Right. And at the same time, there are parts of me and pieces of me that feel some sort of way about like the pockets, like, I don't know, you know, like, because I have Black friends that are like, we need our own Black economy. We need our own Black this, and they want segregation, and they want to be separate, because when we were separate, we did very well. But when we did very well, it came with serious repercussions, right? And so I don't think that that's the solution. I really don't. I believe in my heart that it is only the more that we become connected together, that we will develop the empathy and the compassion to be able to understand each other, to be able to kind of grow together. And I don't know what all that's going to take, and I don't know how long it's going to take, but I have like 3 ridiculously gorgeous intercontinental grandbabies. Like my son-in-law is El Salvadorian, and that like Hispanic, and like part of them are from Honduras, and like they're from everywhere. And if you go to like the great grandmother, she's even Arabic, right? So like we got a whole lot of everything in these grandbabies. And so my thing is that I can't not do the work. I can't not have the conversations just because it makes you uncomfortable, or just because it's a history that you don't want to acknowledge. Have to have the conversation so that we can take ownership of what's happened and what is happening, right? Even the overt stuff. Thanks, Annette. I appreciate that. And that's the only way that we kind of move forward. So let me ask you this as we wrap up, because we're a little over time. But I love this conversation. And like these are the things, like I could do this right here all day. I could, because like to me, this is where, so like if I know that your kid came home and said, hey mom, somebody in my school said ABCDXYZ, and we start to realize like how it impacts our kids and our babies, and what do we want them to know about this world, and how do we want them to view each other, and those types of things, like those to me are the conversations that are so valuable, and so important. So I'm gonna let both of you guys have your last spiel. So if you wanted to say anything to anyone that would be watching this conversation, Dustin, what would you say about the whole topic, about Erwin, about racism, about the Tri-Cities, about, you know, kind of where we are?
I actually want to piggyback off of something that I heard Jen say a little bit earlier about how in her household, in her family, we don't see color. And I think coming from a marginalized person or a person of color, that's a beautiful statement. However, when white people, because white people love to use that phrase, they love to say, well, we don't see color. The problem is that white people are using that phrase without doing the work first. I'm longing for a society where people can say that phrase and it doesn't have a negative meaning because they've not done the work. So I guess what I would have to say about this overall conversation is that we need to get more people having conversations like this in non-marginalized circles. More white people need to be sitting down with each other and saying, there's not a black person here saying, let's have this conversation. It's all white people. We need to acknowledge right now and here, it is a problem. It's the truth. It's history. We have to talk about it. We have to confront it. Not because we want to, you know, we want people to think we're evil or awful. It's not about that. People get their feelings hurt and they think just because we bring up Tom Devert or awful things that happened in this area that we're calling the area bad or evil or ugly. And it's not that. We have a beautiful community here and we have a lot of really loving people here. And it's just you know, but in order to make that community even more beautiful and even more joined together, we have to start having these conversations. I would love to see a day where Erwin becomes a place where black people feel welcome again and want to come and want to move and want to live and want to send their kids to school here and have jobs here. And like, that's what I am pushing for. And if I can just really quickly say, I'll wrap up with this. I told you that I'm own a publishing company now. We are desperately searching for Black, Indigenous, people of color authors who have stories to tell. And these stories do not just have to be about Black pain, Indigenous pain. We get a lot of books about the pain of these marginalized people, but sometimes I'd like to just get a story about a Black superhero and they're just incidentally Black, and it's a great story. So if you're out there and you're a writer or you're an author, or if you write poetry, fiction, anything, please find me, message me, let's talk, because we are trying to actively pursue Black creators, Indigenous creators, people of color who are writing things. We want to put your work out there. We want to help you get noticed. It's a mission of mine. So look up bigsmalltownbooks.com and you will be able to find querying information for our editors. And I would love to hear from you.
Okay, awesome. And I do want to, I'll piggyback off you for just a second. So when we talk about Jen saying that where she's from, she said, in my house, we don't see color. And that's because, like, in Puerto Rico, there's so many different types of people. You don't pay attention to. Everybody's proud of their heritage. Everybody's kind of proud of their differences, and it's not meant. When white people say, "I don't see color," that's I don't see you. Because if I see your color, then I have to acknowledge what comes along with your color in this country. And that's a different thing. It's why I am not Latin or Hispanic at all that I know of, right? And yet I can sit down with Jen and feel like we're good, like I'm good. Yeah, because we know and we've experienced the same things. It's just like, so when I went to Standing Rock, I don't know if you heard me say this, Jen, in a broadcast or not, but it would be the same for you. So when I went to Standing Rock, we pulled up. It was a Saturday evening. It was late at night, and they had their own like security and whatever at the reservation. And the Native American woman, I rolled down my window, and she says to me, "Is this your first time here, or are you returning?" And I said, "It's my first time here." And I get emotional every time. Because she looked at me and she said, "Welcome home, sister." That's what she said to me. And I think about what heart must they have? Like, what kind of people must they be to see me for the first time and simply be able to say, "Welcome home, sister." After everything, I don't know if people realize, like, our government has broken our word with Native Americans over 300 times. We have broken our treaties over 300 times. We write laws that specifically make it almost impossible to hold people accountable for what happens on the reservations and off the reservations. And there's so many different laws around that. And anyway, I want you to see color so that one day you can see past the color, and embrace everything that comes with it. But until you see the color and all that comes with it, you cannot truly love and appreciate what is beyond it. And that's what we all need, is what is beyond it. So Jen, what would you like to leave the conversation with?
I think, like Dustin said, I really wish people would educate themselves, read, learn. I wish people were open to ask questions without being disrespectful. And that whoever's on the receiving end, is able to answer those questions. I know that there's a lot of ignorance out there, and people want to know. So I can't sit here the same way that I'm sitting here and saying, the negative things that I've experienced. I can't sit here and then have somebody come to me and ask me about my culture or my experiences and just come out there like, because, if they're genuinely coming at me, being respectful, because it's not what you say, is how you say it. I have to be able to respond and have an answer. So I really wish people would, educate themselves. And like I said before, in my house, and like I texted with you yesterday, the whole race thing to me is not a thing, because like you said, in Puerto Rico, I'm a little light-skinned. My mom is super white. I have friends and even family who are very dark, who are Black, because we are Spanish, we're Taino, we've got African in us, we're a mix. And so to us, race and color and these conversations that I've had to have with my kids, for example, were not a thing. It's a learning process. It's something that, we've had to do ever since we moved here. There's been days where it's uncomfortable, and there's been days that it's a learning experience for all of us.
Yeah.
So I just really wish, people would be tolerant, respectful, and just open and loving towards one another.
Yeah, I agree. I will say this. So this is what I say. So Jen, I understand wanting to be a place where people can come, because I've always said that. Ask me, I'll help. And I also think that people have to understand that we're also human. So we only have so much bandwidth, right? So before you just use us as a resource, check and make sure we're good first. Like, do you have the capacity for this question today, right? And then the other piece of it, and so this is what I say to my Black friends all the time when they'll say, am I supposed to just educate them? And this is what I'll say. This is what I say to people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color. If you can educate white people and have conversations with white people in a space that does not cause you further trauma, then please do so. But if it causes you further trauma, it is not your responsibility, and it is okay to say no. It is okay to simply say, I'm not your resource, right? And I think that self-care is the most important thing in being able to establish that boundary. So question for Jen, Jamie asks, are you hoping to leave the area at some point?
I've thought about it, obviously, since I got here and I had my very first experience. My very first experience was being called a spick. And I remember after, because we went on a back and forth, and this person is like cussing me out. I mean, he called me a spick, he called me a bitch, he called me this, he called me that. And I was just like, and I was so mad, because usually I would have a comeback. But because this person's yelling in my face, there's people standing around, nobody's stepping in. And I just stood there and I took it. And I was just like, oh my God, And I remember I called my husband crying, like, I am leaving this place. I hate it here. And people are so racist. And he was like, calm down, calm down. What happened? Because obviously he wasn't there. And my husband, I don't know if it's because he's gotten used to it, because that's another thing. There's people that just get used to it and block it off and
Yep.
make no deal about it. I'm not like that. I can't be like that, because like I spoke, we were talking today. I said, if we don't stand up now, this is what your kids and your grandkids are going to continue to battle with, and it's just absurd. So that day he was like, Jennifer, just don't pay attention to it. And I was like, I can't. This guy's in my face yelling, calling me a spick. He doesn't know me.
And it's a man. And it's a man.
Everybody's standing around. Yes, it's a man. And, nobody's doing anything about it. And I was just like, oh my God. So I cannot not feel the way I feel right now.
Right.
So yeah, in the very beginning.
Legitimate.
Right. In the very beginning, I was like, I just want to pack my bags and go back to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Now I feel comfortable. I'm sorry.
As I say, it's a person of color. That's their prerogative if they want to just get used to it. But the thing that bothers me is that sometimes those people of color will get in Facebook comments and say, well, it doesn't bother me. And then white people will jump on that and say, well, why can't you just be like this guy? It doesn't bother him. Like they don't understand the prerogative.
So here's the thing. I kind of equate it a little bit to like Stockholm syndrome, right? So like when you have you ever seen like people who've been abducted and even when they could have gotten away from their abductor, they don't run away, and you're like, well, he let you go to the store, and like, why didn't you run then? And like, human beings are so complex in the way that we adapt to trauma and the way that we adapt to survive, right? So there's always, when we are in traumatic situations, we either fight, we freeze, which is what we're talking about here, right? Or we flee. Those are the three things that we do. So when those people say it doesn't bother me, it's because they have numbed themselves to the trauma of what's happening in order to survive in the world that they're in. So whether they've done that because they have a good paying job, whether they've done that to try to protect their children, whether they've done that because they don't have the ability to relocate and leave or whatever, and why should they? Even if they had the ability to, why should they have to relocate? I mean, I make no bones about it. I needed to leave again. After doing the last 2 years, I literally make it sound like I did time. After doing my last 2 years, it's different. Like it is so, and this is a true statement. When I come to the region, there's a feeling that I get. There's a trigger that happens for me. And when I leave and I hit the North Carolina or the Georgia border, there's this freedom that happens. There is this freedom that happens for me where I feel like almost like, okay, well, I'm safe. And that may sound really crazy to people, but literally imagine being 5 years old, the first time that you're called a nigger or a half-breed or a zebra or a wannabe nigger or a half-bred dog. Or imagine that as a 5-year-old, as a 6-year-old. Like that is when I was first introduced to these terms, when I went to Holston View Elementary School. Children should not have to endure that. And when you do endure that, it is not something that just simply goes away. Right. You deal with it as best you can. And I mean, it is something that I've experienced throughout my entire life. So for me, it's a very real thing. And having just gone back home and literally a year ago been called the same names and received the same threats to my health and well-being that I experienced as a child, those things are traumatic. And to make light of them or to gaslight me and make it seem like I'm wrong for wanting to talk about them, right? Or to minimize them, that's when I go, Like that's when I lose. I lose it because you just don't, if you have not lived it, you do not know.
Mhm.
And it matters. It absolutely 100% matters. And I really hope, like people have asked me, why do I still care about what happens back home? Because it is still home. It is still home, right?
And you want the best for it.
I do. Like I really do. I didn't give up 2 years of my life and like live outside on a 4 foot slab of public right of way trying to save healthcare because I don't care about people in the region, or because I don't like I like white people, right? I don't like racist white people because I don't have to. And I really do want that region to come out from where it is. I want people in that region to become responsible and empowered to live their best lives, to experience things and to learn things that are not the norm. Yes, Jessica, for them to grow, because there's so much beauty in diversity and different cultures and ethnicities. That was the first thing. Like I was 18 when the army sent me to South Korea, and the first time I learned, Korean culture and the difference between Kagogi and Bulgogi, and so Adashi was our little Korean guy that used to come like shine our shoes and drive the taxis, and it was so cute. So like my first Korean word besides Adashi and Ajima that I learned was Yobo, which Yobo means like sweetheart. And so, so the group of us, we'd be going down to the club down at Itaewon, and we would call for our taxi. And I would say, Adashi, you have Yobo? You have Yobo? And the little Korean, they would just blush and like, but it was so cool. We would go down through Itaewon. This is back, I'm gonna date y'all know I'm 48, right? And, and we would be going down through Itaewon, and they like to haggle, and they have all the shops and stuff, right? So do y'all remember In Living Color, the show on TV? So we would be walking down and they said, we give you homeboy price. I give you homeboy price, because they'd seen In Living Color. But that was what they thought to be like Black culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There are just these exchanges that happen. I would not know what I know. When I left, I've told this story. When I went to Fort Jackson for basic, and after your third week in basic, you get your first phone call. So I called my mom. Jen, this is for real. I called my mom after basic, and I said, Mom, I was in Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina. And I said, Mom, I know why there are no Black men in Bristol. They all live here. I was convinced that all the Black men in America lived in Columbia, South Carolina, because there was none where I was from. And I was like, gosh, there are all kinds of shades and sizes. But like, to me, I love being able to go here to the Puerto Rican festival and to the Greek festival and the Peruvian festival, and taste different foods and cultures and just appreciate the way people are. I just think it's so awesome. You know what I mean? It's so beautiful. So that's what I hope. And yes, sometimes in order to get there, we have to have really hard conversations, because you can't just go to the promised land. You got to leave Egypt, and you got to admit your ass was in Egypt. Yep. Right? And you have to own all of that in order to get there. And so like, that's what I want us to do. I want us to take ownership of what we have created as human beings in this country, in our communities, and on this earth. Because when we own it, then we can change it. You cannot change what you do not own. Right?
That's right. Absolutely.
You can't. So Dustin and Jen, I so appreciate you all for this conversation, because you add validity to it. So Dustin, you heard me say this in the other broadcast when I had Coach Hahn and Kyla Janae on. White allyship, especially white male allyship, is necessary, right?
Absolutely.
And we want to have a say in what it looks like, right?
Absolutely.
Because oftentimes our voices aren't validated unless one of you is sitting here with us having the same conversation.
Right.
Yeah, like it takes a white man to say, "Yep, what they're saying is really true," for people to go, "Oh, well, maybe it's really true," right?
Unfortunately,
So
yeah.
yeah, and so like I appreciate that for you. My hope is that you have no repercussions, that everything is good, and that maybe you get some authors out of this. I have some folks that follow me. I know some dope poets,
Ooh,
Yeah, you
that
need
would
to
be
know a
awesome.
poet. Look, Google me. I started out as Danny the poet, by the way. But
Listen, you should publish with me. Somebody said publish a book by Danny, and I would be all
yeah.
for that.
So I have 2 already published.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and I have a 3rd one that's ready to be published.
Very cool.
Yeah, I actually have already designed the cover for it and the whole nine.
Nice.
And then I have a 4th one. And then I have a novel that I want to write called Barefoot Country Crazy.
Oh, that sounds great. I
And
need to
that'd
read
be
your work.
me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we'll talk.
Yeah, let's
but I do
definitely
have
talk
some
about
friends
that.
that are really dope. So we'll share. Maybe we'll do some more collaboration
Sure.
and have some more of these conversations, because I think they're fantastic. And
I
so
agree.
like if you know other folks that want to get in on this, and if you want to come back and if you want to chat, I am game for this all day. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I appreciate you all for your time. I know we've gone like much longer than usual, but it was good.
It's worth it. Yeah.
It was
Thank
so
you.
worth it and so good. So I appreciate you all. Y'all know how I end this thing, right? Be amazing, be like, be love. Peace.
Bye.